Hey, everybody. Thank you all so much for coming to one of our first hybrid night school at the Hall. We really appreciate you all coming here, visiting us here with the Atlanta Federation of Musicians. And Kara Spurlock. Yeah, Kara, I actually got to know, she emailed our office kind of on a whim. She had been conducting some research on a thesis that you'll be hearing more about today. We were thrilled to get her email and to kind of help out in that regard, to spread the word about uh, uh, basically a poll she was taking for stage fright and beta blocker usage, and that's what we'll be discussing today. So a little bit about Kara. She's president of Local 3 in Indianapolis. She's a fellow musician, string player, violinist, recording artist, improviser. I really dig everything she does. It's really, really, really special to have her here. So thank you, Kara, for being here. Let's give her a round of applause. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, as I said, as Aaron said, my name's Kara Day Spurlock, and I'm a violinist. I am president of Local 3 in Indianapolis, but that's not all. I'm very involved in other aspects of performing. I just really enjoy my freelance position in Indianapolis playing, but I also have been studying music performance anxiety, which I'm going to tell you guys about. It's an interesting topic for all of us, I'm sure. So before I get into what I really want to talk about, I want to tell you a story that might start us off to understand what we're experiencing. So a week ago today, I played in church, and normally that's really comfortable space, fun. I get along with my music director. I just, it's just a really great place to, he hands me a vocal score and says, improvise on this. And it's just a good, comfortable space. But this particular Sunday, I got out on, I guess it's not called stage in church, but whatever. I got out on stage and I looked up in the balcony where two of my friends sitting down to worship. And we began the first choral piece, and I felt kind of discombobulated. And I couldn't find my way in the 2/4 and the 4/4 changes, which normally that is not a problem at all because I love multimeter stuff. And it wasn't, it just was difficult. I was having trouble getting my head on straight, and I was landing in the wrong place in chords, and things were just not quite right. But I survived it. I got through it, and I got off stage, and I sat down, and I thought, wait a minute, I'm nervous. This is not good. I'm having a bout of stage fright. So I began to figure out how I'm going to get through the next piece, and how, I did all of my tricks and everything I've learned over the years. And I got back out, and it calmed down, and the next piece was okay. And by the end of the service, I was back on track. But the thing is, I've been performing since I was 4 years old, and that's a total span of, you can do the math, 58 years here. So 58 years I have performance experience. So what I'm saying is, if that could happen to me after 58 years in a comfortable surroundings like church, it can happen really to anyone. That brings me to what I began to study, which is music performance anxiety, stage fright. So stage fright is common. This is the actual diagnosis of it. In 1994, the American Psychiatric Association decided to actually include it in what is called the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of mental disorders, which we call the DSM, with its the fifth edition, is called the DSM-5. This Diagnostic and Statistical Manual is an 1,100 plus page book filled with every disorder, mental disorder, and it's categorized, and it's detailed, so you know the symptoms and the biological aspects of it, and the behavioral disorders. So it's categorized and it's complicated, but it's used for diagnostic purposes. So in 1994, they finally figured out that maybe performance anxiety actually is something that we need to figure out how it's affecting people, because it's affecting enough people that it can be really categorized as a disorder. So the American Psychiatric Association added it to the DSM-5. It is a subset of social anxiety disorder. Social anxiety disorder, as it says here, this is actually what I have here is the definition of what's in the DSM-5 of what social anxiety disorder is, which is a marked fear or anxiety about one or more social situations in which the individual is exposed to possible scrutiny by others. So music performance and performance anxiety, because as we know, this can affect many people. It doesn't just affect musicians, it affects, theater actors and anyone in public speaking like this, athletes. Athletes are part of, can be very susceptible to performance anxiety. Anybody who's under pressure in a public forum. So in the DSM-5, the MPA or performance anxiety is actually a subset of social anxiety disorder, but it is not actually the same. So the way the specifier for it is individuals with performance only type of social anxiety disorder have performance fears that are typically most impairing in their professional lives. This leaves a lot of space because social anxiety, MPA or music performance anxiety does not necessarily affect our professional lives. It can affect us when we're playing in church. It can affect us in any situation when we're playing our instrument. So as we move forward, there are other definitions that are really more specific to what we're suffering when we have these problems. Dr. Paul Salmon did a study back in 1990, before the DSM-5 definition came out. And he stated that it was a persisting, distressful apprehension and or actual impairment of performance skills to a degree unwarranted given the individual's musical aptitude, training, or level of preparation. That's interesting because we all think, well, no, we don't all think this, but a lot of us feel that if we just practiced this away, it would go away. And in reality, it doesn't necessarily do that. We can practice, we can prepare, we can do everything, and it still can invade our space. Later on, in 2009, Dr. Diana Kenny, who is one of our leading authorities on music performance anxiety, she has wonderful information out there. She redefined it as music performance anxiety, the experience of marked and persistent anxious apprehension relating to the musical performance that has arisen through specific anxiety conditioning experiences, and which it manifests through combination of affective, cognitive, somatic, and behavioral symptoms. So anxiety conditioning experiences, that is what we'll talk about in a minute as part of the vulnerabilities that cause us to have these issues to begin with. And our behavioral symptoms, affective, cognitive, somatic, and behavioral. Affective, how it is affecting us. Cognitive, our thought process. Somatic, the physical responses. And behavioral symptoms, how we respond to it in turn. So here are our somatic symptoms. What is it doing to us physically? We all understand what it's like to get up on stage and shake or quiver. Our legs feel weak. We get trembly. We have dry mouth issues. We can't feel our hands, our hearts pound, all of those things that happen to us physically. Cognitive issues are our inability to focus. We lose our perspective. We lose our concentration. We don't have the ability to concentrate the way that we know we can. We have memory lapses. There are famous stories of famous musicians who just all of a sudden can't remember where they are in the recap or whatever. It's just it can be cognitively difficult for our brains to process what we're going through. The interesting thing is these two are not connected. You can have physical symptoms, you can have cognitive symptoms. Like last week, for example, I wasn't shaking, I wasn't nervous, I didn't think, my legs were fine, my hands were fine, but my brain was in the coat closet out in the hall hiding in the corner. I couldn't think to save my life. And it was in a state of panic. So these two symptomatic problems that we can have don't necessarily go hand in hand. And it's easy for us to recognize our physical symptoms. It's not so easy for us always to recognize our mental symptoms. So to move forward, this stuff can really affect us in a lot of different ways. It can do actual damage to our careers through peer opinion. If we have a difficult time getting through something, our peers can oftentimes judge us based on our performance. It's not necessarily that that's how we really play. It's just that we're having difficulty with something that's affected us. It can weaken our resilience to getting back up on stage, getting back up on that horse. Let's try again. Let's do another performance. It's not going to be as bad this time. And eventually we get tired of trying. And that weakened resilience can lead to mental health issues. Our mental health issues of, I have catastrophizing on there. Catastrophizing is actually the situation where we tend to overemphasize or imagine that things are worse than they are. And it can be a worry cycle. We can begin to think, oh, well, the last time this happened to me, it was like this, and it's going to be worse. Or that I got out on stage and that audience thought I sucked. They just think I didn't play well. But the reality of it, maybe the audience thought you were great. So this can lead to a pattern of mental health issues. It can be damaging to our self-efficacy, which is our belief in the fact that we can do this. And it can be a problem to our self-esteem. Why are we doing this? It really can make us feel like we are not as good as we actually can be. The thing that's a really interesting aspect of MPA that we don't think about a lot of is it can be physically aggravating to our health. We all know how stress affects the body. It's been made very aware to us that we need to reduce our stress levels and we need to help our bodies cope with stress, but MPA is a form of stress, and we oftentimes don't actually think of that. We don't realize that what we do for our job is actually difficult, and that can be very hard on us physically. When we have a bout of MPA and we've got those physical symptoms that are hitting us in the face, our blood pressure can get higher. Our cognitive abilities begin to create stress within our thought processes. It can increase our risk of heart attack, our risk of stroke, and then there's another side effect to the physical symptoms, and that is how many of us self-medicate. There are people who have a shot of whiskey before they go on stage, or pop a beta blocker from a friend, or there are things that we do that can cause us problems down the road a bit that we don't realize, but we develop a dependency on doing these things so that we can survive our gig. These things can lead to addictions. That's a whole different side of this. That can be problematic. So vulnerabilities. Who's vulnerable? Let's say you have Joe here, and Joe never gets nervous. And then you have Fred over here, who's nervous every single time he gets on stage. What's the difference between Joe and Fred? Joe may not have the same vulnerabilities that Fred does. So let's discuss how these vulnerabilities come into play. Starting off, biographical. How did we get from when we started playing our instrument to where we are? These incidences can affect us throughout our lives. Did we have supportive family? Did we have supportive teachers? Did we have teachers that really understood how we process stage fright? Or did they belittle us? Or did they tell us it's all in our minds? Or how did we relate to the educational system when we were growing up in our training? Biographical incidences of we got up to play our jury in college and it went disastrously. And now here we are 20 years later, getting ready to walk out, and we still recall how that felt. So our biographical story, our story of how MPA can affect us, lives within us. It creates vulnerable pockets within our processing when we are getting ready to go on stage. So I'm going to go to biological. I know I have these in an order, but in biological is another one I want to speak about, because these things are how our body is made up to handle these stresses. The personality traits that we have, negative and positive, are biological, is our biological makeup. So when we have negative personality traits, we have maladaptive coping, we're perfectionists, we have a tendency to have high trait anxiety. What trait anxiety is our natural tendency to be more prone to anxiety than others. That's a personality trait. That's a biological vulnerability. Some of us may have in our biographical history, shaming or feelings of guilt or problems when things happen that become part of our personality and our cognitive thinking. At the same time, Joe over here may have higher positive thought processes. He might have a positive outlook. He might enjoy this process a little more than Fred. So these positive things, he might have higher self-efficacy. Self-efficacy has been shown to be a key player in this. Do we believe we can handle it? That's really a strong part of being in the positive frame of mind. Sociocultural vulnerabilities. Sociocultural is, what do we live in? What world do we live in? Do we have great rapport with our bandmates? Are we in an orchestra that has a high pressure level? Do we have support from our community? Do we have support from our families or our friends, our colleagues? How is our sociocultural system set up? That can play a big role in how we handle these things. Demographically, demographics are risk factors. For example, women have been shown through research to have a more difficult time with MPA than men. It's not completely solid research, but at the same time, more studies have shown that that's the case than the studies that show that it's not. Gender, genre. Genre is another risk factor. Classical musicians have been shown to have more trouble than other types of musicians. It's something that it's documented that classical musicians have a tendency to feel more pressure on the job. Experience level is another risk factor, but at the same time, experience level doesn't necessarily guarantee that you're going to get better over time. It's a sort of an iffy mixed bag there. Experience level can show us how the tricks that we have learned along the way, if we continue to learn how to handle these things, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's not going to affect us. Age. I wish I could say that as you get older, this is going to get easier. For some people it does, but for some it doesn't. And I found this very interesting in my research, which I'll get into in a minute, that age kind of just sort of smoothed it over, but there was just as many people that had a difficulty with this every time they got on stage as people who didn't, even at my age, at the older age range. Instrument, whatever instrument you play. Some studies say brass players have more difficulty. Some studies say string players. My research showed it's kind of a mixed bag. It was brass players, definitely, string players, but woodwind players also expressed issues with it, and pretty much on an even level. So now, conceptualization, that is a term that we use in the scientific world to try to figure out what MPA affects and how it does. For example, is it pathological? Is this problem that we have as musicians or as performers, is this actually a disorder or a disease? Is this something we don't want? Is this actually a positive trait? If we get it under control, does it help us? Some people consider being nervous and having stage fright as a fuel for wonderful creativity or imagination. It's something that they feel like it's the spark that once they get it under control, it ignites a fantastic performance. Cultural is music performance anxiety embedded in the culture of what we do. Is it a genre? Is it totally a genre specific thing? What types of different culture, what types of different genres or what types of different scenarios does MPA actually live and breed? Is it, like I said, is it the culture of classical music? Is it intrinsic? It comes down to, many people say, well, that just getting nervous is just part of the gig. That's what happens. It's intrinsically built into what we do. If we look at it that way, then are we training those who are getting ready to go out into this business? Are we training them to understand that this is just part of the gig and this is how we're going to figure it out? So how we look at the concept of this problem also helps us figure out how we're going to address it. So I decided back in 2020, when the world stopped for all of us, and I had already cleaned out every closet in my house, and I had practiced every etude book until I was tired, and I had nothing else to do. I decided to go back and complete a lifelong dream, which was to get my master's in psychology. My husband had decided, even with his corporate gig, to do a PhD, and so he was really into doing this scholastic thing, and I wanted to too. So I signed myself up through Purdue University in Indiana through their online school, and I applied to get my degree in psychology. After numerous papers, I think I did 108 papers or something like that. I kept falling back to musicians' issues. So when it was time for me to do my thesis, I wanted to write about musicians' issues. I wanted to talk about things that we have problems with that are psychologically based. And the one that I just kept landing on was my dear old friend, stage fright. So I decided to write my thesis on stage fright and how it affects us. The beginning of this process, I had established my research questions, which were, who has this problem? How often do they have this problem? What do they do for it? And as I said, what are the risk factors? Is it genre specific? Do only string players have it, et cetera, et cetera. I came up with my research questions. I wanted to know the answers to these things. So then I did a literature review, which is a deep dive into all the data that have come prior to my point of doing my research. And everything I have presented, the vulnerabilities, the risk factors, the conceptualization, all of this is stuff that has been brought to the understanding of MPA to this point. I then moved in to wanting to get approval for my project. I had to present this to a thesis committee to make sure that that I was doing a job of applying everything that I had learned and applying everything I wanted to learn in a correct fashion so that I would actually achieve what I wanted to achieve. And I had to then move on to an institutional review board, which checked out everything legally and ethically. I had to go through a whole process to make this happen. at that point, just like Aaron said, and this is how I came upon Atlanta, I drew up a questionnaire that asked all these questions so I could figure out where we stood. Where are we currently in this situation with stage fright? So I contacted, starting at local 1, and I sent out emails to 44 locals. I started with local 1, local 2, I skipped local 3. I went on and I sent out all these emails, which had an invitation, a request for information, and a request to contact through each local to send my questionnaire out to the membership. I ended up with 14 locals that said yes, 32,000 members that received my questionnaire, and I got 172 responses that I could use. So that was good enough. That gave me a little idea of what I wanted to learn. So after that, I did a statistical analysis. My thesis was published in July of 2024. The first thing on my questionnaire was consent. Are you okay with filling out this form? Are you over 18? I want to know the basic musical demographic questions. What'd you play? How long have you played? What genre do you do? All of that. I wanted to know questions about how often do you have MPA? How often was it affected? What was the most severe situation where you found yourself with it? What genre? All of the different risk factors. Then I found out this information. So my literature review findings, which was all the data before me, said that everything from 15% of musicians to 95% of musicians have had this problem. And my findings landed around 86% that said, yeah, I've had this at some point in my career. Musicians ranged. I had a range. I asked them how often they experienced it. I had everything from 22, 23% saying, oh, not in years, I haven't really had it, to about 50 or so percent saying, yeah, it happens to me occasionally. All the way to 8% of people saying, I have this every time I get on stage. So I went then on further. I wanted to know, what is the worst severity level that anyone's ever had? So I had about 12% that said, it's just a bad case of the nerves, all the way around to 6% of people saying, this was so terrifying, I couldn't even get on stage. And then there was kind of the middle of the road there of about 50% of people that said, yeah, it was pretty bad. I didn't like it. It was not very fun. Then I went even further and I wanted to know how many people has this affected so dramatically that they've either considered changing their careers or not playing. And I had over 25% of people that actually said they had reevaluated their career choices because of struggling with MPA. And over 10% of people said they actually turned down work or performance opportunities because they were scared of dealing with this. And that to me is pretty rough. It's really sad. But that was why we wanted to address this, because we want to see if we are handling this and how we're handling this. So these are the breakdowns for the genre. Classical musicians, 58% considered it once in a while, but 12% said it happens to me every time I get on stage. Jazz musicians, 40% said, occasionally, it's pretty rough. 12% said frequently. Freelance musicians, I am one of those, said 56% said occasionally it's pretty bad. 10% said frequently. So then I went on to look at instruments, instrument groups. Here's what I was saying before, 57% of brass, once in a while. 5% said almost every time I get on stage. 52% of woodwind players, once in a while. 4% almost every time I get on stage. Strings players, 57%, once in a while, occasionally it's pretty rough. 14% said almost every time I get on stage, I have to deal with this problem. Now, here's the interesting thing about age breakdown. I asked between the ages of 18 to 24, 25 to 29, 30 to 39, 40 to 49, 50 to 59, and 60 plus. I was expecting it to get better. But if you look at the way that the grid lines up, it just doesn't necessarily get better. It evens itself out as we get older, but it doesn't necessarily get better. The reality is 8% of the people I surveyed at over 60 say they still have it so badly that it's at almost every performance they have trouble with this. Now, here was the next phase of my thesis. I was approached in I forget when it was, sometime in the 80s. A friend of mine knew I was really struggling. I think it was 1982. A friend of mine knew I was struggling with horrible music performance anxiety, and it came from a situation that I had in a jury where I had to do a recital for a grade, and I had a difficult time, and all of a sudden I started to tumble down this rabbit hole of having stage fright every time I came near a stage. My friend approached me and said, I have a secret, I have a new thing, you got to try it. And she gave me a beta blocker. And I remember the first time I experienced it. I got out on stage and I'm thinking I'm going to be terrified, and nothing happened. And I played great. And I'm thinking the whole time, I'm waiting for the knees to knock, and I'm waiting for the bow to shake. And I'm waiting, as I'm a violinist, but I'm waiting for all of my problems, and they didn't come. So I went to investigate further. I wanted to know where I could get these miracle drugs and how I could use this to get myself through getting my degree. Well, after a little bit, I began to realize I didn't actually need to take them all the time. I actually could recall how I felt. So years later, we'll fast forward, my daughter, who was getting her degree at Jacob School of Music, Indiana University, and she was having a terrible time with stage fright. And she had talked to her professors and her teacher, and they had tried everything. And she came to me and she said, Mom, I want to do beta blockers. And I was like, ooh, okay. All right, well, fine. But I don't really know a whole lot about beta blockers because I haven't taken them since the 80s. So I wanted to research them. So this tied into where I began my research for beta blockers. Before I approved them for her, which I really didn't have a choice, she was going to take them regardless of whether I said yes or not, I wanted to know more about them. So beta blockers, they're an FDA-approved drug. They've been around since the early 60s. They were approved for cardiac conditions. But in the mid-70s, beta blockers were discovered to help with anxiety because they do two things. They slow the heart rate down, and they cancel out the adrenaline response. They slow that adrenaline response down. So well, I said, okay, if you could take them and they help, let's try them. I looked into my literature review findings. They were talking about how, like anywhere from 30% to 70% of people said they took them. In my findings, it came up to 44% of people said that they took them. This is how they work. I love this stuff. Okay, so you take a beta blocker. The first thing that happens, let's go before you take your beta blocker, there is a tiny, tiny little thing, a little area of the brain. It's called the amygdala. The amygdala is like that big, but it's right in the center of your brain. It is what I call the watchtower of our brain systems. The amygdala is scanning our environment for threats. The problem is the amygdala is not evolved enough to know when it's a real threat, like we're facing down a bear, or a perceived or an imaginary threat. We're getting ready to walk out on stage to a happy audience who thinks we're wonderful. The amygdala doesn't know the difference. So it sends the alarm. It goes, alert. Oh my gosh, threat. And it sends it to what is the control area of the brain, which is the hypothalamus and the thalamus. That is the area that sends out the message to every other area. It's called the limbic system in your brain. The limbic system loops around and gathers all the information from the other areas of your brain. Okay, the amygdala sent out its threat. The hypothalamus says, hey, I found a threat. There's an alert system, and it's going around in a circle, and it gathers this information. It goes to what's called the hippocampus. The hippocampus is the area of the brain that uses memory function. The hippocampus is the filing system. It's going through the filing system, and it's going, stage fright, stage events. Oh yeah, this was a bad one. Okay, so let's recall that. This is similar, and it goes on, and it feeds into the limbic system alert system, and that goes to what's called the HPV axis, the hypothalamus, which then collects all this information from the limbic system, and it goes into the pituitary system, and that shoots it down to the adrenals. All of this is going on through little teeny tiny sections in your brain, and they're shooting little electrical impulses that are attached and flow through what's called neurotransmitters. We all know serotonin, dopamine, norepinephrine. Those are familiar, but there are actually like 100 some odd more of them. There's so many neurotransmitters, and all of this is going on, and all of this happens to us in not even a second. It happens so fast before we even know what's happening. It's an electrical response. And that's where it goes all the way down to the adrenaline. Now, the adrenaline's got the message from the brain through the nervous system, and it says, okay, we have a problem. We have fight, flight, or freeze. And we are going to we're sending out the cavalry to solve this problem because you're in a threat. So all of this system is actually built in our ability to protect ourselves. We're actually trying to keep ourselves safe. But the reality of it is, in a circumstance for MPA, we don't need to really be safe. We just need to create and play our music. That's what we need. So we need to calm it down. Beta blockers go in and they stop that process. They go straight to where the adrenaline response is and say, hold on. Nah, this isn't necessary. You don't need this. Calm down. And so it does. That message gets sent back up. Hey, this drug that we just took says this isn't a problem. Calm down. The cognitive issues calm down. That's what happens when we take a beta blocker. I'm not in support of beta blockers. I'm not saying they're bad. I'm saying they are there. And this is how they work. Somebody, when they found out that I was going to do this research, came running up to me and said, beta blockers aren't bad. And I said, whoa, I'm not saying they are. I just want to know how they work. That's all they are. That's all it is. Symptomological redirection is a situation where a brass player gets a dry mouth and a string player has shaky hands. Why our brain plays these tricks on us to cause us to have the problems that are directly involved with what we actually do. So when we take a beta blocker, it calms all of that down, and then everything evens out. So you don't have only the problem that's affecting you, or only the cognitive issues, or the whole gamut, whatever. It's all basically there. So, oh yes, I wanted to say one other thing. There are interesting things about beta blockers that we do need to discuss, and that is that they've got a couple good side effects and a couple bad ones. The good side effect is that actually beta blockers or propranolol, which is what we all take, or as known as Enderol. That is the primary beta blocker for music performance anxiety. It actually can help the hippocampus to delete or dissolve certain memory issues that we have from previous experiences. It's something called operant conditioning. When we have operant conditioning, is a situation of the conditioned response. It's a trained response. So when you operantly condition yourself, you have an experience with something, and then you recall that experience. And when you are sometimes one good side effect of beta blockers is that they can, or propranolol can help the hippocampus to reset that. There are bad side effects, and that's one of the things that we definitely need to share, because oftentimes we don't think of this. Beta blockers, because they are cutting down on the adrenal response, can cause us to not have adrenaline when we need it. That can be a big issue for some people. So it's similar to respiratory things. If you have asthma or if you have a heart condition, and the adrenal response is there to save your life or to help you get re-established so that your body can reset if you're having a problem like a diabetic shock or something like this. So if you have blood disorders or cardiac issues, it's important to know, if you want to take a beta blocker, that you need to have this monitored medically to make sure that you aren't cutting down your adrenal response when you might actually need it. Those are beta blockers. So I went a little further. I want to talk really quickly about something that was a fascinating part of my research. It was called the ICSOM Medical Questionnaire. It was done in 1987. It was a big deal for ICSOM orchestras. It was published in August of 1987. It was designed to understand medical issues that musicians have. There were 2,212 participants, over 1,400 men, almost 800 women. It was reported that stage fright was the most prominent problem that many musicians doing the ICSOM questionnaire actually reported. And that's including musculoskeletal problems and dental problems and cognitive issues and high blood pressure and all these other things that we all suffer from. But it asked some interesting things. It wanted to know how much we exercise, what we do besides that. So in 2015, another questionnaire was passed out at an ICSOM convention that was similar. It was called the 2015 ICSOM Musicians Health Survey. This one did not ask a lot of the physical questions, like, do you have tendonitis, or have you had TMJ or other issues that musicians will get? It focused basically on music performance anxiety. The interesting thing was that it was reported that beta blocker usage had increased to 70% of the people doing this questionnaire in 2015 from 27% in 1987. So that matches similarly to my participant response, which was that 82% of my participants still say they use it. I wanted to know how often. So I got a response of about maybe 50% that said, occasionally I will take a beta blocker to help me through. But I had 13% that said they take them frequently, and I had 21% that said they take them every time they get on stage. I want just to know what other people are doing as well as beta blockers. What else do we do for this? This was very interesting. 60% of all my participants said they used breathing techniques. When I got on stage and saw my friends in the balcony last Sunday, I began my trained breathing techniques. When I began to realize, oh, okay, this is a problem, halfway through that song, when I was doing things that I couldn't believe I was playing, I began the breathing techniques. So I know that a lot of people do these things. And I also noticed that a lot of people spoke up about exercise and yoga. The 2015 ICSOM medical survey showed that more people are now doing yoga or exercise than we're doing in 1987. So this is another thing that we've developed. Performance training and coaching, psychotherapy and counseling. That's something that can help us with some of the personality traits and that we found in the vulnerabilities when we have issues that are messing with us, that are not really related to our performance, but that we can help. Cognitive behavioral therapy, that's another one that we could call upon. to help us to retrain our brain, to retrain how we handle these situations. A lot of people 9% used Alexander technique. I found it interesting that only 7% said that you just need to practice. And yeah, I'm right there with them. Practice really helps. It makes a huge amount of difference in your fear level when you get up, but still, only 7% said that's what they do. We all practice, but it's not always necessarily guaranteed that that's going to actually help us to defer this problem if we have it. So lastly, to just kind of wrap it all up, I want to say what we know it is, what we know music performance anxiety is, and what it's not. We know it's a strong apprehension. Apprehension to me is not really that I think it's worse than an apprehension. I think it is a really strong fear of what's coming at me sometimes. Somatic symptoms, our physical symptoms, what we have problems with, our cognitive difficulties. When we get up on stage and we just feel like we're being an idiot, it's not necessarily that we are, it's that we actually might be having MPA. The fact that we do live with the possibility of it affecting us long term. But what it's not the jitters or butterflies. It can start out as MPA, it can start out as terrifying, but as we get rolling, we can calm it down and we can get it to the point where it's just butterflies. And that's actually something we can work with. It's not a lack of preparation. That's something I remember being told when I was young. You just have to practice it away. It just didn't seem to work that way. I just couldn't practice it away. So it's not a lack of preparation. So if we are having this problem, or if our colleagues are having this problem, or our kids or our students, we must understand that there's more to this than just we're not prepared. A lot of people in my day and age felt like we could just keep working harder, but it's not necessarily the case. There are things we need to address, and it's okay. We have this. It's also not connected to other forms of mental illness. If you are suffering from social anxiety disorder, or you're suffering from depression, it does not necessarily mean you're guaranteed to have music performance anxiety. It's not connected. It also means that if you have more music performance anxiety, you don't necessarily have other mental illness problems. But overall, in the grand scheme of things, it just means that it's something that we have to address, that we must address with kindness and care and self-health and mental health and understanding. And we need to treat ourselves kindly and treat ourselves with health in mind as we do this. None of us do this career because we think we're not here for the money. We're here because we love music. Musicians are not going to be musicians because we don't love music. And we want to address music performance anxiety so we can still continue to do what we love. On that note, I want to thank you, Erin. Thank you very much for inviting me. Does anybody have anything to say or comments to make or questions? I will say I am not an expert. I'm just someone who has studied this to this point, but I'm happy to answer or direct. I do have some really wonderful information.
Yeah.
Yes.
Kara, hey, I just wanted to say thank you so much. Let's give her a round of applause, everybody.
I have on the screen, I have more information. These are a couple of things I found. I mean, a lot of us are familiar with some of these. The Bulletproof Musician is a favorite of mine. It's a website that has all kinds of interesting information to help us. I just put these up so that you can use those as references for any help. Does anybody have anything to ask me or want to add to this?
I have a quick question.
Yes.
I've heard
beta blockers, but I admit I have no idea what they are. Are they prescription? Are they
Yes,
something? They are.
they're a prescription drug. Propranolol is the generic name. Enderol is the trademark name that is usually prescribed for musicians' anxiety, for musicians' performance anxiety. I've been prescribed. I was prescribed one time, and it was not. Yeah. So this was years and years and years ago. But that's what seems to be the one, and. From my research, it looks like it was about 10 to 40 milligrams is kind of the range. I know some people go for more, some, try to leave it on the very low end of that. But that's what it looks like is how much it is. They're a prescription, FDA approved, prescribed, actually, for cardiac problems, for your heart problems, but they help with anxiety. They're using beta blockers now to help treat PTSD because of the discovery that it helps the areas of the brain that store the memories that cause PTSD. So they're using those, and they're experimenting with that now. So does that help?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I didn't know if there was a over-the-counter version or.
Oh, I wish.
Yeah, okay.
Wouldn't that be great?
I know.
Yeah, no, you do need medical assistance, and it's highly recommended that you have medical assistance because of some of the side effects. When you suppress the adrenal system, you can find yourself in situations where you need the adrenal system. And getting up on stage, just because you take a beta blocker and you get out on stage, once you get off stage, that beta blocker is still in your system for a while. So it can lead to problems, which I have, seen in my own world, that it's caused problems for people after the fact. Anyhow, anything else? Yes?
Yes, I have two
Yes,
questions.
yes.
The first one is about the butterflies,
Oh, yeah.
because I'm a bit confused with is
The-
it good to talk, like I teach kids
Yes.
piano,
Yeah, yeah.
and is it good to talk about butterflies, or is it
You don't want to, you don't want to give them the wrong ideas. You don't want to get them to think that they're supposed to get nervous.
I know the parents themselves already, if the
Mm-hmm.
kid comes after the performance and say, oh, I was feeling nervous, and the parents say, oh, you had those little butterflies. It's not,
Yeah.
they're not mean to you. They're
Yes.
just little butterflies. They try to help this way, but is it?
I think there's we have, as teachers, we have to find ourselves addressing it to make sure that the students understand that we acknowledge that it actually might be more. It's one thing to kind of, it's easy for us as parents, I know, because I have done it with my own kids, to say, you're okay. But we do need to just dig a little bit to make sure they are okay. I think that's a key element. I mean, I think one of the things that I found that was interesting is how much we've increased the conversation about this. In my day and age, and I said how old I am by telling you I've had 58 years of performance experience. You can do the math. In my day and age, we didn't discuss this. It was not something we discussed. I remember my professor in college, or one of my professors, making me run up and down the stairs in the hall, 20 times till I was just so exhausted I could barely breathe, and said, okay, go play. Go do your Brahms concerto now. And I'm like, really? And he's like, yeah, this is what it's going to feel like when you get on stage. And that was it. That was the extent of our conversation. I was like, oh, okay. And I never really thought about it. But then again, when I really began to have music performance anxiety, there was no knowledge, no acknowledgement of it. Or, if there was, it was like, oh, you got to get over that. You just got to, there was just, it was not talked about in the way that we are talking about it now, because of the research that has been done prior to. When I was doing my research, I found that the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s was a really great time for us to be talking about this stuff. There was a lot of research done, and that opened up the door for a lot of musicians. And I wanted to know, when my daughter was going to to the music school. I wanted to know how it's taught now. Is it taught differently? Are we, and that was part of my research. I wanted to find out, do younger people have better skills at understanding how we deal with this because maybe they're being taught differently? Are we addressing this at the collegiate level or at the, at the level where people are studying to prepare to be professional musicians? So that was something I found I didn't get really enough solid participation in that age group to really know, but that's for future research. I can do more research, which I am actually interested in doing. Yes, and you have a second one.
Quick second question. Have you researched homeopathic remedies? I know one
Yes.
that is gelsemium, for
Mhm.
example, that
I
I'm
know.
using myself.
I do know that there were several people that suggested homeopathic remedies. When at the end of my survey, I opened it up and I said, please tell me what you use. And I had wonderful information. I had people typing in paragraphs of things and said, some of them gave me specific homeopathic treatments. But it was so little information, there wasn't enough information to really be able to statistically break it down. So I'm sure there are lots of processes that people use that if we open up this conversation, we can talk about it and share it and possibly help in different ways. Yes, the beta blocker thing is a go-to for many, many people, but it's not necessarily it doesn't necessarily work for everyone either. I had somebody come and talk to me about their experience with beta blockers, and they said, I had a horrible time. It didn't work for me at all. I found myself numb. I didn't like it. I didn't feel the passion that I wanted to play with. So there's difference. It's a mixed bag. I just wanted to know how many people use them. So yeah, it's interesting. I did see on my questionnaire, a couple people suggesting, and a couple people suggesting specific homeopathic herbs or yeah, it was very interesting. Anybody else? Yes.
Coming off mute here. Yeah. Thank you. First of all, I'm just I have to say that there are big feelings of relief. Kind of hearing you say this stuff. I'm about half and half with teaching and performing. And one of the things that I tell my students is that, you probably will get nervous. Like being nervous is natural. And I grew up with a teacher that told me everything leaves you but your preparation. And, so that's that practice more idea.
Yeah.
And I too am someone who in my sophomore comp, I wear glasses now but my whole life because I had a bad experience with that as someone with an astigmatism that wore contacts. And it had nothing to do with my preparation, but I was nervous and my contact slipped and I, blinked it back into place and missed a note. It looked like I was surprised by what was on the page. So I have had a lot of experiences where the feelings, like the actual physical things happening versus the actual nerves being, it's interesting to hear you say that those are separate, that those are not connected, because I've had some surprising experiences there too. I think the question that I have ties into a little bit to a previous question, and that's when it comes to beta blockers and children, right? Like this is not something that we want to suggest necessarily. And so I was wondering if you had any experience with, well, I mean, I know that you do with your daughter, but she was in college at the time. What do we do when it comes to kind of learning about this and appropriately exposing families and children to the idea of using beta blockers?
Yes. Well, I mean, so one of the interesting things that came out of the 2015 ICSOM questionnaire, survey, that one's the survey, you gotta keep them straight, is they wanted to know what was the earliest age you had stage fright. And it was broken down to 11 to 15-year-olds who actually reported, and I'm drawing a blank on those numbers right now, but if you look that that survey up, you can see that they actually had people who were reporting having stage fright as early as 11 years old. And then they said, you know, most people got it between around 16 to 25 or so is when they started experiencing. And then there were other people who developed it later on in life. But that was an interesting thing. So how do you address stage fright with an 11-year-old? That's an interesting topic. I really appreciated very much how my daughter's professor handled this in college. She was in her senior year. They tried everything up to that point. She's done cognitive behavioral therapy. She had done breathing. She had done a variety of different things to try to alleviate it. And she was just having so much trouble. It was just calling it, let's try this. So, but you know, she was 21. And it was okay at that point for me to say, yeah, but I don't know how you would address this with children. I don't know, maybe it's a possibility that they may not have it bad enough. Also, cognitive behavioral therapy is a really interesting technique. It's the ability for a therapist who's trained in this to help you to cognitively reroute behavioral problems. So they work with a difficulty that you have. And that's one of the reasons why cognitive behavioral therapy might be something to try with younger kids. It's something that you can't do any damage because you're not giving them a pharmaceutical or something else. You're just simply saying, when you think of this, let's think of this. You know, it's just a rerouting of the thought processes. So maybe that might be a way to go with kids. I don't teach anymore. I loved teaching, but most of my kids were not struggling with this problem until they were later on in teenage years. So
that's wonderful. Thank you very much for that. And I have found that for most of them, I mean, they're kids, right? So they're still learning what they're doing anyway, and the practice element is a big part of it. So I think my biggest concern is not creating, boxing myself in with a narrative, right? In the process of going through different breathing or cognitive techniques and stuff with kids who do have nerves and are having a hard time with it, not kind of boxing myself into a teaching narrative where in the future, down the road, if it does come to that, where it's a surprise, or you know, I've kind of blocked that as a possibility when it could really help them.
mm-hmm.
So thank you very much for those insights. I really appreciate it.
Thanks. So and I guess that would be a response to your teaching
Yes.
question as well.
Definitely.
How are you going to handle this with your kids? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess it's just something I think we just, you know, if we can try to address things in as benign a fashion, but with actually still validating the fact that they're having this problem. So
I think it has also to do with the relationship with the parents when they're younger, because I had one occurrence of a mother coming to me and say, we need to do something because she will not be able to perform. My daughter is not going to be able to perform if we don't do something. So then I was able to suggest a little bit of homeopathic remedy, but always talking to the doctor first.
right, that's a very good idea.
So
And there's always the yes.
Did you or one of these previous studies have more data on dosage versus efficacy?
There was a great study, and I've got it here. I will share my let me see if I go back. I have my references here that I can, oops, I don't know what I'm doing. In my references on my here, let me get my techie involved. Can you help me? So I have references that of some of the literature that I used. I need to go back to my my PowerPoint so I can scroll back. It's not scrolling, see, I'm stuck. there is a great study, and I can't tell you the name of this because I can't pronounce the name. It's a very difficult name, but it was a study that I used. I used a lot of reference material, but some of the things that I've used in this presentation, I actually put into my into a reference page on this. That you can look up these studies and see what's there. I did find one of the studies also stated that range of 10 milligrams to 40 milligrams. I know people who take more. Oh, I need the next one. How did you do this? It's nice to have a tech crew. But yeah, oh, here it is. Okay, so I don't know if you can see my, how do I share? I want to share my screen with you. It's, it's such a complicated name, but yes, okay. So do you see the one that's, it's just above Taffet. It's Frankowski. That one right there.
Got
Yeah,
it.
that study is really great. That's a study that actually specifically looks at propranolol for PTSD and music performance anxiety. So it's a study. I don't know for sure if it's accessible to the public, but you can find it. So there's the reference material for that. That study will maybe take you to finding out what the efficacy level of how much you need to make it work.
Thank you. Yeah.
That's one. And there's also, you know what? There's another one in here.
I'm gonna take a photograph.
Yeah, take a photo of that. And then also there's another reference page here. As soon as tell me when I can scroll up, and there's another one. Did I put it? I'm hoping I put it in here. It was a great article that I found that talked about performance. Oh yeah. Oh, well, here's it. Well, no, that's not it. Maybe it's not. It is here. Playing with performance: the use and abuse of beta blockers in performing arts. Paxton and Lowland. It's the second one down on the same page. That is another article that I found that was really, really good at discussing how we use beta blockers for performance.
And Kara, if you're okay with it, I'm happy to share the PDF version
Yeah,
of
that would
your,
be fine.
yeah, I'd be happy to send it to everybody after our meeting today.
And if in this process, if you find something that you are wanting more information about, or if you find something that I've got wrong, tell me, come and talk to me, because I'm finding one of the things about science is that we try to make things replicable so that we can retest and retest. And if we get different information, then we can learn from our experiences. So, oh yes, there's my thesis. That's my thesis. It's there. If anybody wants to bore themselves to death reading it, if you need something to put yourself to sleep, it'll do it. If you've come upon information, if you come upon more information, I actually found the ICSOM 2015 health survey after I finished my thesis. I'd never found that. I dug around and looked, and so much stuff, probably almost 100 articles and websites and all kinds of information. And that was something that just became apparent to me just recently. So, so I miss things, and it's just what it is that we are talking about this. We're establishing a community to teach ourselves and to others, and to continue on with the education and the acceptance of the fact that this is just part of our lives. Not everybody has it. I envy those who don't. But as I said, 86% of the people I asked said, oh yeah, I've had that before, so. Anything else? Well, thank you very much. Thank you, Erin. This has
You're
been
so welcome.
wonderful.
Thank you, Kara.
I appreciated being able to share this with you.
It was great having you today.
Thank you,
Kara.
I appreciate the Atlanta.
Thank you for having the conversation here, and we really appreciate you coming all the way from Indianapolis to be here with us.
I'm very happy as a union member here to see what you guys have going. It's terrific. And
Yeah.
welcome any of you, if you ever are in Indianapolis, come and knock on our door, just the same. Yeah, well, so thank you very much. I appreciate it all. Thank you. So
Thank you all so much.
thank you.
All righty. Have a wonderful rest of your Sunday and happy President's Day tomorrow, everybody.
Yes.
Bye now.